Okay, got some interesting stuff tonight um, with Abraham, and okay, and first of all, okay, we did say now we are being historical, so to speak, because Abraham is considered he was a real person, and we are so we are doing that journey kind of like historically and uh, and how he's called and all these neat little stories. Um, but what it's all about, especially from our perspective, it's about Abraham's spiritual journey. Okay, and we started at chapter 12. We'll go to that where Abraham is communing with God. He has a special well, it's something that we all have, but so I have um, I have Dr. Erico on video to help us out tonight because he Dr. Erico's main emphasis throughout the years has been Genesis, and he particularly favors Abraham, and um, and that, along with Matthew and the Gospels, has been his forte. And so I went back, I went back a ways to some of his lectures on this, and I just found some interesting stuff. And so when we're talking about Abraham's spiritual journey and Abraham's religion, so I'm going to go ahead and play this. It's an interesting perspective. Just kind of listen to it. Um, it's well, like I say, it's an interesting perspective. So,
recorded vision we have of Abraham's communion with God. This is when his soul opened up and God chose Abraham. And this is another question I'm often asked. How come God chose Abraham? There were a lot of people to choose from. Why did he choose Abraham? In fact, why does God choose anyone? Well, let me tell you about that to explain the meaning of that. I think I did this once before, but I'm going to do it one more time again. God is like running water. Now picture God like running water. And when there's an obstacle in the way of the water will either go over it or around it. It can't go through it because it's an obstacle. But let me tell you about what it means to be chosen by God. When an obstacle has a hole in it, when an obstacle has an opening in it, the water will go through that obstacle and come out the other end. So picture this. Picture God as water, and there is like a barrier in the way, but the barrier has a hole in it. So the water goes through the hole. So when the water comes out the other end, we only see one part. We only see the part where the water is coming out of. And then we say, that person is chosen. It's not that God says, I like this one and I'm going to choose this one. It's that that person has an opening, is opened to the ways of God, has a heart full of faith, has a heart full of trust. When that heart is open, when that trust is open, the water goes through. And then when you look at it from the other end, when the water goes through and you're on the other end of it, you see the water going through, well, we say, God has chosen that person. It's not that God says, I specialize in people. God doesn't specialize in people. It's just the people specializing in God. That is, they are open to God, open to his ways, open to his channels. Everything is wide open, and the water goes through, the truth comes through, the light comes through, the understanding comes through, the harmony comes through, the love comes through. This is how it works. But when you're looking at it from a human point of view, you only see it coming through and it looks like they are specially chosen. Well, that's what it means to be chosen. It means this person has opened up to the ways of God. And you have to realize this is also showing what a huge, tremendous soul Abraham had. I talked to you last time about the two forms of religion. There is the adopted form of religion, and there is the intrinsic form of religion. And when you study Abraham, you're studying the intrinsic form of religion. And what I mean by religion is the spiritual side of life. I know we often think of religion as just dogmas and doctrines, which it often happens to be, and belief systems. But in this case, what I mean by it is simple, very simple. An intrinsic religion is one that has to do with love, harmony, peace, joy, justice, understanding, enlightenment. This is what it has to do with. And so when we study Abraham, this is why he needed no book. He needed no Bible. He needed no Quran. He needed none of these things. He had his soul. His soul was the living book. His heart was the living tablets upon which the simple truths of God could be written upon. And once we understand that, once we see that, when you're reading then the story of Abraham, you're looking at it differently.
Okay. All right. Now, I got one more that's going to talk a little bit more about this intrinsic.
Core division we have of Abraham's communion with God.
Wait a minute. Hold on.
Core.
There we go. Okay, a little bit more now he'll have on this intrinsic religion of Abraham.
You see, where does religion originate? Religion originates in the souls of human beings. That's where religion originates. I say there are two types of religion today. There is what I call the intrinsic, natural, born religion in every man and every woman's heart. Every child has a natural, intrinsic understanding of religion. Now, when I say religion, I don't mean doctrines. This is why I like what the Bible uses. The Bible doesn't use the word religion. It uses the word urha. And urha in Aramaic means the path, the road. It's a path, it's a road that gradually gets unveiled in your own heart and in your own mind. So the intrinsic religion doesn't mean you know everything right from the start, but intrinsically, that is inwardly, you know certain things are right and certain things are not right. And so you're not bothered with doctrines or dogmas or what kind of belief system you should have. You just know that you can treat others correctly, and when you do, this is the intrinsic religion. And this was the religion of Abraham. What happened is to Abraham is he opened up in his own heart and mind. But how did it get through to him? It gets through to him through the language of the soul. And what is the language of the soul? It's beyond Aramaic, beyond Hebrew, it's beyond all that. What is the language of the soul, of the human soul? The language of the human soul is a dream. Dreams. Your dreams are your language. That is, a dream is the language of your soul. But it comes in symbols. Symbols you are familiar with. Symbols you understand. And so, what we're getting is the intrinsic religion of Abraham. Abraham is opening up. And what What an insight he gets in this dream. I love the word for dream. The word for dream in Aramaic is helma, helma, and that's spelled Helma. You can add another H if you want to get the sound. Helma is how we say it, helma. And the root of the word to dream means to make whole, to make sound, sound in the sense of wholeness, and to be healthy. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting that to dream, the same word to dream also means to be wholesome, to be healthy. And this is what Abraham first receives.
Okay. I thought that would be a good lead in
You see, where
to well, we're really doing chapter 15, but before we go on to chapter 15 is the whole chapter is a vision. Okay. Now, and remember, that's how throughout Abraham's, the stories on Abraham communes with God through visions, and Dr. Eric calls it a dream, but it's the same thing. Now, I wanted to go back here before we go into the vision in chapter 15. I just wanted to go back to Genesis 12. This is the first time when now the Lord said to Abram and asked him to leave his country and said, I will make of you a great people, and I will bless and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, da 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 da. All right. And so, and then when we get down to verse 7, then the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, to your descendants will I give this land. And Abram built there an altar to the Lord, for he had appeared to him. So I wanted to go back to this because now in chapter 15, and remember now, this is a dream. This is a vision that Abraham is having. This isn't real time. All right. And how do we know that? Once again, here we said, after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abraham. And right here it says it in a vision, saying, fear not, Abram, I am your shield, and your reward is exceedingly great. And Abram said, O Lord God, what wilt thou give me? For I will die childless. And Eliezer of Damascus, one of my household, will be my heir. And Abram said, behold, thou hast given me no son. And behold, one of the members of my household will be my heir. Then the Lord said to him, this man shall not be your heir, but your own son that shall come out of your own loins shall be your heir. So we're back to 12 because God was promising his descendants, okay, and then we get to 15. Abraham's starting to say to himself, wait a minute, I don't have a son. Okay, and it wouldn't matter if he had a daughter. No, it wouldn't matter. But the fact was that Sarai was barren, totally. But it wouldn't have mattered because culturally, back then, a male would inherit money, would inherit the estate. Remember that the firstborn son got everything, controlled everything. So, but if you didn't have a son, then it would go to, and Eliezer was his servant, like his chief, his chief servant ran his household and everything. And if you didn't have an heir, if you did not have a son, then when you died, It doesn't matter about your wife or your children or anybody else. Well, he didn't have any children, I'm sorry, but didn't matter about his wife or whatever. Eliezer would take over and inherit his whatever, his wealth, his possessions. Okay, so culturally, that's what they're talking about there. But so Abraham has started saying, "Well, wait a minute, I don't have an heir." Okay, so then, now you got to remember this is in a dream, right? He's having a dream, and so now in the dream, um, God, he brought him outside and said to him, "Look now toward heaven and number the stars, if you are able to number them." And he said to them, "So shall your descendants be." Typical, Near Eastern writing, literary style. It got symbolism in there and amplification. Um, and Abram believed in the Lord, and it was counted to him for righteousness. Now, he does say now, and he said to him, God said to him, "I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to inherit it." And Abram said, "O Lord God, whereby shall I know that I shall inherit it?" And I think it's not necessarily a doubt or a loss of faith here, but he's just trying to. Well, it's actually trying to. It's right before the covenant. So, and he said to him, "This is sacrificing. This is what they did. This is what the pagans did. This is what, of course, sacrificing was carried through all through to the temple, even in Jesus' time. But so God said to Abraham, "Take for yourself a heifer, 3 years old, a 3-year-old ram, a 3-year-old she goat, a pigeon, and a young dove." Now, notice the 3, 3, 3. It could have been 3, it could have been 2, it could have been more, but this is writing. This is a story. This is the way it's written. Okay. And he took to himself all these and cut them into and laid each piece against another. But the birds he did not divide. Okay. And when the birds of prey came down upon the carcasses, Abram drove them away. Okay. This is a dream. Now, remember, this is in his dream. But what we just heard about the heifer, the ram, this is sacrificing. Okay, this is what they would slaughter and burn, and so he is seeing that, and he understands from the dream that this is a ceremony to establish a covenant. Okay. And they call that in the Hebrews call this the covenant of the pieces. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep, but remember, this is still in the dream. A deep sleep fell on Abram, and lo, fear and a great darkness fell upon him. And the Lord said to Abram, "Know of a surety that your descendants shall be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and shall be in servitude, and they shall afflict them for 400 years. But I will judge the nation which they shall serve, and afterward they shall come out with great wealth." and you shall depart from this life and go to your fathers in peace, and you shall be buried at a good old age. And after 4 centuries, they shall return here, for the iniquities of the Amorites are not yet full. And it came to pass that when the sun had set and it was dark, behold, there appeared a smoking furnace and a burning torch that passed between those pieces. Now, we're going to read some stuff next on it, but remember, the smoking furnace and the burning torch, it is representative of the presence of God. It doesn't seem like it would be to us because we think about hell and fire and burning, but this it did symbolize the presence of God. So, and he knew in real life about these ceremonies, but that's coming to him in a vision, and it's establishing the covenant between God and Abraham. Now, a little bit about the covenant. I had to research this because I just didn't understand it. The commentary didn't have anything on it. So, a covenant, okay, it's an agreement enacted between two parties in which one or both make promises under oath to perform or refrain from certain actions. Covenants and covenant ceremonies were integral to the political makeup of the ancient Near East. Animals were often slaughtered as part of a covenant ratification ceremony. Okay, as we know, in Genesis 15, in Hebrew they call it Karath and Berith, appear together to describe a covenant ratification ceremony. Yahweh makes a promise to Abraham that he will give him land, descendants, and blessing. When Abram wonders how he will know this for certain, Yahweh instructs him to cut various animals in half. Yahweh then passes between the pieces of the animals. By being the one who passes between, Yahweh places the penalty of violating the covenant on himself. He is showing Abram how serious he is about his promises. Now, another little, all right. By cutting the animals in half during covenant ceremonies, the parties making the covenant were effectively saying, let this be done to us if we break the terms of this covenant. Now, I just want to go back to the scripture because when you start researching this, other than what we have in the commentaries, it is just incredible what is out there. And the one thing that I noticed, people got really hooked on the idea that Abraham cut the heifer, the ram, and the goat into pieces, but he didn't cut the bird in half. Well, I honest to God, people just really got hung up on that. Have gotten hung up on that, and so there's many. There were many explanations, but I'll give you two, and you can sort of make up your mind. I may make a little comment too. All right, so basically, coming from a Jewish kind of standpoint, say, well, you didn't cut birds in half because the birds are small enough that you didn't have to, and that the others were cut in half. Because remember, this is they're being burnt on an altar. And if you ever seen pictures of the temple back then, you know, they have the slaughtering table and they cut them up. It's gory as get out. So, um, so that's the simple explanation. Now, the explanation that has been applied by Christians today, they say Abraham made a mistake when he didn't cut the birds in half, and and because let's see, because he didn't cut the birds in half, that was a sin, and something, let's see, something was going to happen to him. I don't know, but that's what we do. That's what Christianity does. And whatever, you know, I don't know what denominations was, but it obviously was Christian. But they put these things on them, and you know, it's because they don't understand the culture, and they just want to, you know, I mean, here is Abraham, just this wonderful spiritual, uh, totally righteous, totally in touch with God. Okay, has, you know, has left his home where he was very prosperous, very left his home on the orders of God, and now he's establishing the covenant. And then you come up with this interpretation that Abraham made a mistake and he sinned, and I can't, I just can't remember the rest of it because it just bothers me. It just bothers me so much. But you know, and you know, to just get hung up on that part of it. I mean, so what does that mean? But so that's the two. Basically, you know, you didn't cut pigeons and doves in half when they were sacrificed. That's the simple one. Or, you know, it's up to you. You can do the other one. But the other thing you got to remember about that, if you say, "Oh, he sinned," and da 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 da, well, there weren't any sins yet in that time. Sins only came about after the law was made. When you had laws, then you had sins, but you don't have sins in Abraham's time because there was no organized religion, there were no organized laws. So, anyway, I just thought that was really interesting. So, okay, and I think, let me see. Yep, that was the end of chapter 15, and now Abram is going to have more visions, but I think we're going to focus on Abram's spiritual journey, and like I say, spiritually, he trusted God. He left his home. All right. He now, you know, in this dream that we just talked about, um, it clearly says in there uh, that he's going to give, God's going to give his descendants that land and whatnot, but it's going to be 400 years. I mean, he says that in the dream, but Abraham still goes ahead and makes the covenant. So Abraham is really special, uh, and well, kind of like Jesus, but in a different era. And then remember, Abraham is the father of all three religions: Jewish, Islam, and Christianity. So next week we'll have more visions, and these are these are just interesting stories. And I don't know. I put a little blurb out with the email that Dr. Erico had said about reading the Old Testament like this, and read it like a novel. And you really can. The Old Testament, you can read it just like a novel. And so, but we'll focus on the spiritual journey of Abraham. Anybody have any questions or comments? I'm really glad we decided to do the Old Testament. A lot of people don't really want to have anything to do with it, but people also don't understand that Jesus taught from the Torah, the Old Testament. And, you know, to me, that just helped me tremendously when I learned that. Just because it's not that I didn't believe Jesus or that he couldn't have done that, but I don't know. It just opened it up to me, and it made more sense to me that Jesus was teaching from the Torah. Jesus was Jewish, and he was teaching Jewish people. He was a rabbi, and he studied the Torah. And more as I go through and reference things and whatever, uh, it's you can go through the New Testament, and they're always, even Paul references back to the Old Testament. So